The following is a presentation of the Retro Network.
Step back in time, then jump ahead. From retro shelves to what's hot today. Action figures, plastic dreams. Every toy has something to say. We chase the rare, the love, the lost. Mint in box or battle worn. From dusty bins to holy grails. It's the hunt we're living for. Welcome to the wide world of toys, where every collector finds their voice. From vintage vibes to the brand new noise. Come play, come share, come join the joy. In the wide world of toys. Spin the dial, rewind the years. Hear the stories, laughs and cheers. One more figure, one more find. Collecting keeps us young in mind. Yeah, this is the wide world of toys. So grab your memories, make some noise. Let's dive into the wide world of toys.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wide World of Toys podcast. I'm your host, Ken, and I'm glad that you found your way back to the show. It's been a little while since I did my last show, which was episode 3, about a month and a half ago, but I'm back for episode 4, and I can't wait to get this one going. If you remember last episode, on episode 3, I welcomed my co-host of the Retro Resurgence podcast, Chad, to the show, where we had a great time talking about the awesome WWF Hasbro toy line from the 90s. If you didn't listen to that episode, you can always go back under the Retro Resurgence podcast feed, wherever you listen to podcasts, and give that one a listen. It was a really fun episode to do, and me and Chad had a really good time. Before we get into this show, episode 4, let's get into some feedback that I had back from episode 3. I had 2 pieces of feedback, both from our loyal listener, Gerospace. His first piece of feedback came from our Retro Resurgence Instagram account, and he says, I still have the Big John Stud and Hulk Hogan figures displayed proudly on my retro shelves in the man cave. My Hulk Hogan has a big bald spot from my brother running his head down the door. Well, hey, at least it got a lot of good play out of it. And then Gerospace gives us another piece of feedback on my Wide World of Toys Instagram page. And he said, super fun episode, guys. I still have several of my old wrestling figures proudly displayed on my retro shelves, including Hulk Hogan and Big John Stud, 2 of my favorites. So yeah, thanks Gerospace. It's always good to hear your feedback, and I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. Not only can you leave me feedback on my Instagram, widerolloftoys_RRTRN, you can also leave feedback under the Wide World of Toys section on the Retro Resurgence podcast website, which is www.theretroresurgence.com. I've written a few articles over there on the website too that you can go read and leave a comment if you so feel like it. Alright, so why don't we dive into episode 4 and get into our main topic of the show. In today's episode, we're going to power up those electronic wonders of the 70s. The handheld beepers, blinkers, buzzers, and battery eaters that defined an era. From LED football to Simon's almost hypnotic tone. From tabletop arcades to the earliest digital quests. I'll give you 4 of my favorites and 1 honorable mention. So let's grab our AA batteries. Hey, who am I kidding? We'll probably need some C's, D's, and maybe a 9-volt. So flip that power switch and let's relive the golden age of electronic fun. The first electronic game that I'm going to talk about today is Digital Derby from the company Tomy.
It's a beautiful day for Digital Derby, ladies and gentlemen. Tommy Hill starts out cautiously. He jams his car to second gear. Now third, he's really moving. The traffic is tight, but Tommy Lee Hill's in the lead. Look out, Tommy! Too bad. Tommy Lee Hill's out of the race. Tommy, you had a rough time out there. What happens now? Will you retire? Retire? I'm only 8 years old. Oh, yeah.
Batteries not included. Digital Derby Auto Raceway comes complete with lap counter and timer by Tomy.
It was released in 1978. This game challenged players to navigate their race car through a non-stop flow of oncoming traffic. 2 C batteries powered this game's electric motor, lap counter, and automatic timer. The player would control their race car at the base of the screen using a small 3-spoke steering wheel. As a scrolling display of cars and line markings moved down the screen, the objective was to steer around the other cars. If a crash occurred in the game, a red light displayed on screen and all the cars stopped, requiring the player to reset the game before leaving the accident. A gear lever allowed players to speed up and slow down the speed of the obstacles while the lap counter kept track of progress. The duration of each game was dictated by the timer at the top of the toy. Each race lasted 1 full cycle of the timer, and the player with the highest number of laps was declared the winner. So, I never personally owned this game as a kid, but I knew some kids, and I think I had some cousins that probably had this game back then. And even though I was young in the late 70s, I still remember playing this game, and it was a lot of fun. So there we go. The Digital Derby from Tomy. Moving on to my number 2 pick. A lot of you guys will recognize this game. It's known the world over. And of course, I'm talking about Simon from Milton Bradley, also released in 1978.
Simon sets the pace. You follow right along. Light the lights that Simon lights, or he'll tell you that you're wrong. Simon's a computer. Simon has a brain. You either do what Simon says, or else go down the drain. Simon is a master. He tells you what to do, but you can master Simon if you follow every clue. And if you think Simon's fun at a party, wait till you play it alone.
Simon with 5 ways to play from MB Electronics.
Invented by Ralph H. Baer and Howard J. Morrison, working for the toy design firm Marvin Glass and Associates, and software programming by Lenny Cope. Simon is an electronic game of short-term memory skill. The game creates a series of tones and lights and requires a user to repeat the sequence. If the user succeeds, the series becomes progressively longer and more complex. Once the user fails or the time limit runs out, the game is over. The original version of Simon was manufactured and distributed by Milton Bradley and later by Hasbro after it took over Milton Bradley. Much of the assembly language code of the game was written by Charles Capps, who taught computer science at Temple University and also wrote one of the first books on the theory of computer programming. Simon was launched in 1978 at Studio 54 in New York City and was an immediate success, becoming a pop culture symbol of the 70s and 80s. Named after the simple children's game of Simon Says, Simon's gameplay is based on Atari's unpopular Touch Me arcade game from 1974, but Simon differs from Touch Me in that the Touch Me buttons were all the same color, black, and the sounds it produced were harsh and grating. The original version or classic version had 4 colored buttons, each producing a particular tone when it is pressed or activated by the device. A round in the game consists of the device lighting up one or more buttons in a random order, after which the player must reproduce that order by pressing the buttons. As the game progresses, the number of buttons to be pressed increases. The tones that are played in Simon were designed to always be harmonic, no matter the sequence, and consisted of an A major triad in second inversion resembling a trumpet fanfare. The E note was the blue button in the lower right. The C sharp note was the yellow button in the lower left. The A note, the red button in the upper right. And there was another E note, but this was an octave lower than blue, and that was the green button in the upper left. So you definitely know, if you grew up in the late 70s or definitely in the 80s, this game of Simon was, in my opinion, pretty fun, but it could get frustrating from time to time, trying to remember the sequences and the sounds of the buttons, and the speed, it would increase as the game went on. And overall, I think I enjoyed this game pretty well as a kid. I do believe I got it as either a Christmas present or a birthday present one year. Alright, so that's going to bring us to the third electronic game. This also was released in 1978, and this is Merlin from Parker Brothers.
I'm Merlin, the electronic wizard, challenging you to 6 computer games. Start with simple tic-tac-toe. Your turn, my turn. I'll tell you if you win and when you lose. Play all kinds of games. Echo, Blackjack 13, Magic Square, or formidable Mind Bender, or make beautiful music together. Merlin, the electronic wizard from Parker Brothers.
Merlin is a handheld electronic game first made by Parker Brothers in 1978. Invented by former NASA employee Bob Doyle, his wife Holly, and brother-in-law Wendell Thomas, Merlin is notable as one of the earliest and most popular handheld games, selling over 5 million units during its initial run, as well as one of the most long-lived remaining popular games throughout the 1980s. There was also a version of this game re-released in 2004 by the Milton Bradley Company. The game has the form of a rectangular device about 9.5 inches long and 3 inches wide. The play area of the game consists of a matrix of 11 buttons, each button containing a red LED. These buttons could either light up or flash. The array is encased in a red plastic housing bearing a slight resemblance to an overgrown touch-tone telephone. 4 game selection and control buttons are also placed at the bottom of the unit. A speaker takes up the top section. Supporting electronics, including a simple microcontroller, are contained within the shell of the game. Parker Brothers would later release a game called Master Merlin with more games, and the rarer Split Second, where all games involve time with a more advanced display, having line segments around the dots. Both of these shared the same general case shape and came out a few years after Merlin. The original Merlin contained 6 different games, some of which could be played against a computer or against another person. The games that can be selected are Tic-Tac-Toe, Music Machine, Echo, which was a game similar to Simon, Blackjack 13, Magic Square, a pattern game similar to Lights Out, and Mind Bender, a game similar to Mastermind. The Music Machine game functions as a musical instrument. In this mode, each key is assigned a musical note, and sequences of notes can be recorded and played back. This makes Merlin one of the earliest digital sequencers as well as an early consumer-level electronic synthesizer. Merlin appeared with Milton Bradley's Simon on the cover of the Christmas issue of Newsweek and the October issue of Boston in 1978. Until Frogger in 1982, Merlin was Parker Brothers' most successful product in terms of units and revenue. The Toy Manufacturers of America named Merlin the best-selling toy, and game item in America in 1980, with 2.2 million sold. In its entire lifetime, the game has sold more than 5 million units. So yeah, I don't ever remember owning this game as a kid, but I always remember seeing the commercials and seeing it in the stores, and yeah, it looked pretty cool, and with having 6 different types of games on it, I can see why it was a big seller back in the 70s and 80s. Alright, and that's going to bring us to our 4th game, and this is the very popular Electronic Football by Mattel, 1977.
Ladies and gentlemen, we challenged hotshot Dick Tchaikovsky to play the Mattel Electronics football game. Dick doesn't know, inside is a tiny thinking computer that plays like a whole team of pros. Dick's got the ball, but that computer defense is tough. He drives up the middle, stopped cold. 1 yard. Now Dick cuts left, down the sidelines, touchdown. Mattel Electronics Pocket Football with a built-in computer.
Hey, who's in there?
An American football game for 2 players. The player has 6 buttons at his or her disposal to control the movement of the current player forward and to either side of the field. A status, score, and kick button. Electronic Football was released in June of 1977 as the second game released by Mattel. The game of Auto Race was the first, and was sold through Sears. After less than 100,000 units were made, Sears, using a computer model based on initial sales figures, determined that the games would not be big sellers, and most of the production for football and Auto Race was stopped. But within 6 months, it became obvious to Sears that their prediction was wrong, and production was started up again and reached previously unknown levels, reaching as many as 500,000 units a week by mid-February 1978. So I'm pretty sure we all know this game. You couldn't go anywhere back in the day and go into the stores and not see this game on the shelves. I did not own the original Electronic Football, but I do own Electronic Football 2, and it's pretty similar in nature to the first game, and it gives you all those nostalgic feels of the original, which is pretty cool. So yeah, Electronic Football, a great reminder of the games of the 70s. So before we get out of the episode here, I'm going to give one honorable mention, and this is not a game per se, but as I always say, you were young back in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm going to give my honorable mention to the Little Professor Calculator from Texas Instruments, 1976. The Little Professor is a backwards functioning calculator designed for children ages 5 to 9. Instead of providing the answer to a mathematical expression entered by the user, it generates unsolved expressions and prompts the user for the answer. When the user turns the Little Professor on and selects a difficulty level, an incomplete equation such as 3 times 6 appears on the LED display. The user has 3 chances to enter the correct number. If the answer is incorrect, the display shows 3 capital letter E's. After the third wrong answer, the correct answer is shown. If the answer supplied is correct, the Little Professor goes to the next equation. The Little Professor shows the number of correct first answers after each set of 10 problems. The device is powered by a 9-volt battery, and the types of problems can be selected with the plus, minus, asterisk, and division keys. There have been a few different versions of the Little Professor calculator over the decades. The first, released by Texas Instruments on June 13, 1976, as the first electronic educational toy, the Little Professor is a common item on calculator collectors' lists. In 1976, the Little Professor cost less than $20, and more than 1 million units sold in 1977. The second generation Little Professor was designed by Mark Bailey, now a full life-sized professor, while working for Raffo and Pape an award-winning toy design consultancy based in the UK. In a brief interview in 2013, Bailey stated, "I've designed everything from private jets to pregnancy tests, but Little Professor remains the highlight of my career." During the 2000s, a solar version of Little Professor was introduced. And in 2012, an emulator of the Little Professor for Android was published. In 2015, the MESS emulator also included the original Little Professor as sort of a pack-in. And starting in 2022, the CS50 course at Harvard University features an assignment based on Little Professor. A pretty little interesting history there for this little calculator. I know I definitely had this as a little kid growing up in the mid to late 70s, and I wish I could get my hands on one right now. I'll have to go maybe check eBay out to see if there's any at a decent price, but I do know I remember having this. It was pretty cool the way the design was. It had a little professor guy with glasses on and a white mustache and a graduation cap on his head, so I'll always remember that as having one as a kid. Well, all right, everyone. There you have it. 4 pretty awesome electronic games from the 70s. To this day, I can still think back on these games and remember those sights and sounds that forever were stuck in your brain. Were they simple and primitive in nature? Of course they were, but that's what made them so great and endearing. Many of the handheld games back in that day offered basic gameplay that combined simple lighting effects, sound, and moving parts. But we didn't know any better back then. It's all we had, and we loved them. I know I did. That's going to do it for episode 4, everyone. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening to the Wide World of Toys podcast. I hope you enjoyed diving into the world of toy collecting with me today. You can find this show under the Retro Resurgence podcast feed on all your major podcast platforms. You can also find the Retro Resurgence podcast on our website, which is www.theretroresurgence.com, or at our flagship website, the Retro Network, www.theretronetwork.com as well. You can also follow the show at my Instagram account, at wideworldoftoys_RRTRN, where you can share your favorite childhood toys or latest finds. Send me a message and I'll read any feedback I get on the show. Until next time, keep hunting, keep displaying, and keep those childhood memories alive, one collectible at a time. This is Ken signing off, and remember, growing up is optional, but collecting, that's forever. See you soon.
This has been a presentation of the Retro Network.